substantial peace talks between the Sudanese government and rebels under the leadership of former Vice President Riek. Now, SABC's East African correspondent Sarah Kimani joins us from Nairobi in Kenya. Good morning to you, Sarah. Can you hear us?
Good morning.
Sarah, please give us an update on the very latest coming out of South Sudan.
Well, what is happening is that both sides are now accusing each other of having broken the ceasefire. The government saying that the rebels have fired at their areas, and the rebels saying that the government has fired at their areas. The Norwegian government, actually, their representative to South Sudan from Norway, saying that the ceasefire is very fragile, and also complaining that both sides had actually flouted the ceasefire.
Sarah, is it accurate that fighting actually continued before and after the signing of this ceasefire, and why is this?
Well, we cannot confirm independently, but reports coming out of South Sudan actually indicate that fighting is continuing despite the ceasefire, and it is not clear why, because both sides are the ones that are insisting. And up to now, it is believed that up to 10,000 people have died. But also because when you look at what was signed, the two speaking points, the issue of the political detainees and also the issue of whether the Ugandan forces will leave, were actually not comprehensively addressed, and probably the reason why this is happening now.
Sarah, just tell us about the roles of the African Union and then that of IGAD, the East African Bloc, in the signing of this agreement and as well.
Well, IGAD, a regional group, is the one that is leading the talks, and they are the ones who managed to broker the ceasefire deal that was signed in Ethiopia on Thursday. But African Union has no troops inside South Sudan. The only country that has actually confirmed that it has sent troops inside South Sudan is Uganda, and it says that it did that at the invitation of the South Sudan government. And this is one of the issues that the rebel leader, Riek Machar, is saying has to be addressed. He has actually asked that the UPDF forces leave South Sudan. However, when we asked one of the mediators on Friday, General Lazaro Sumbeyo from Kenya, whether UPDF would be leaving South Sudan, he said they do not have to leave. Once hostilities cease, they will be mobilized, and so they do not actually have to leave the country.
Sarah, do we have any idea or any further idea as to what is contained within the peace agreement?
Well, the peace agreement was supposed to take effect 24 hours after it was signed, so it was supposed to take effect from Friday. What we understand now is that during that time, when hostilities are ceased, the country will continue being ruled by Salva Kiir, but a political settlement, they will begin discussing a political settlement beginning next month. They say the parties will return to Ethiopia on February the 7th. It is not clear whether by this time the political detainees will have been released, because Machar indicates that some of the people who have been detained are actually key in the negotiations that will start in February in Ethiopia.
Sarah, should there be any optimism around this peace agreement that there will now be lasting peace?
There's actually some disappointment, especially from the United Nations, who say that they would have liked for the ceasefire to hold so that they can continue giving humanitarian assistance. They're saying by end of March, if the fighting does not stop, there will be about 600,000 people who have been displaced, whether internally or outside of South Sudan.
Sarah, I want to talk to you about the human cost and what we're seeing, a lot of displaced people. Tell us about the situation of displaced people in northern Kenya and then in South Sudan as well.
Well, we understand that, take for example, in Kenya, at least 600 people are coming into the country every day to the Kakuma refugee camp. Kakuma was home to a lot of South Sudan refugees in the 90s during the clashes up to 2005 during the civil war. In Ethiopia, in Uganda, there are even more. They're talking about 1,200, and those people are living under deplorable conditions. Valerie Amos saying, the UN humanitarian chief, saying that the food that is getting into those areas is not enough, and so they're making a humanitarian appeal, especially for donors to continue supporting those within South Sudan and those who are outside the country who are in need of food and water, and also medical care.
Well, Sarah Khayelitsha, our East African correspondent, giving us an update there on the latest peace agreement that was signed in South Sudan. Of course, Sarah will keep us updated as to how that story develops over the next week or so on all our platforms here at SABC News. Moving on, Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia, has dubbed South Africa as the protest capital of the world, with the country sporting the highest rates of public protests in the world today. The rate of protest has been escalating since 2004. However, according to political analyst Stephen Friedman, the current wave of protests stretches back to the 1970s in this country. The rate rose dramatically in the first 8 months of 2012 as 540 protests were reported in Gauteng province between the 1st of April and the 10th of May in 2013. Now, police brutality in South Africa also continues to be under the spotlight after 4 people were killed following a protest over water shortages. In the latest incident, 1 person was killed in Roodepoort's Durban Deep area. The list seems a long one and continuous one. To strike a balance between the right to live and the right to strike a protest, we are joined by a senior Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch, Africa Division, that's Dewa Mavinga. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about the right to protest first in South Africa, and we just mentioned now that South Africa is regarded online as the protest capital of the world. What do you make of that?
Well, the South African Constitution is very progressive, and it does guarantee the right to protest peacefully. The challenge then comes in terms of what are the mechanisms to ensure that that right is guaranteed, but also is balanced in terms of other people's rights, in terms of the community, in terms of the interests of peace and security.
The right of life should surely supersede all other rights, no matter how progressive your constitution is.
Absolutely, and this is why it is important for government and law enforcement officials to ensure that there is that sanctity of life that is protected, and that in response to protests, they will always have that regard that there is a sanctity of life, and that the response, the use of force is proportionate to the threats posed, and that there is sufficient training of law enforcement officials to be able to manage crowds.
Are those the only reasons why we are not getting the balance right in South Africa? Or from where you guys are sitting, are you seeing other factors at play as well?
Well, there is a huge concern in terms of the prioritization of the need to protect the right to life, the need to ensure the right to protest. There are concerns around the training of police officials. There are concerns around the policies that are in place, whether or not they actually meet the international standards, the UN basic principles on the use of firearms and the use of force.
You talk about the training of police officers. Is it not maybe time for South Africa to take a look at this holistically with all the tragedies we've had and say, okay, we need a new direction, and if we do, what would you think would that direction be? It is absolutely time for South Africa to seriously consider a new direction for the police force and for policing generally in South Africa. And we expect that President Zuma would take a lead in making it public that there is a right to protest, and that the police should be held accountable, those responsible, because the challenge has been that there is a perception of impunity. Yeah. That those responsible for the past abuses, including killings, have not been properly held to account. Yeah. So there is need for a new direction that focuses specifically on issues of accountability, the need to end impunity, and on a rights-respecting framework within which protests are dealt with in South Africa. That comes down to responsibility, and in this case, on both sides of the coin, both the protesters and the police. At what point do you sit, or do you accept that a protest is out of hand and you need to act in a forceful manner? Well,
There are clear rules in Standing Order 262 that make it clear in terms of what the police are expected to do and what are the circumstances under which they would be able to use force and to what level. So these should be implemented without fail. The challenge is when there is a perception of a disregard of the rules that are in place and a failure to hold accountable those that go by the wayside. And in terms of dealing with criminal acts, the police are fully empowered, but within a framework of rights-respecting environment. The challenge is when there is now a perception that police brutality is acceptable or that it will not be punished. That is the challenge that we need to address.
What about the criminal element in South Africa amongst protesters and what we call criminal opportunism? What kind of role does that play within protest in South Africa?
Well, it may play a role, certainly, but where there is sufficient training, holistic and comprehensive training for the police to be able to anticipate and deal with those issues, it should not be an excuse for taking away life. We have said that, the Constitution protects life and the sanctity of life is front and center. Even those that commit crimes, there are ways and channels which the police should use to address the issue.
Let's talk about you guys at Human Rights Watch, your role. Just tell us about your role and how people can access you if they have concerns, and legitimate ones, within the protest movement in South Africa.
Human Rights Watch works to defend human rights globally. We work in more than 90 countries, including 18 countries in Africa, including South Africa. We document and monitor human rights patterns and practices across these countries and make recommendations to the governments, concerns, and other institutions on what ways to improve the human rights environments and the protection of human rights in these countries. We are in South Africa. We have offices in Johannesburg. We do not work on individual cases, but we look at cases of groups and patterns and systems. So when we are looking at police brutality, we are not looking at it individually for cases, but across the country. So we are accessible in South Africa, and we urge members of the public, we have cases to report that we will document and take it up with the relevant authorities.
The protest capital of the world, they say. Very strong words. But that in itself, you say, is not a complete negative. It shows that unlike other countries like Zimbabwe, where protests banned completely, South Africa is a vibrant democracy where people can actually express their views and opinions.
Absolutely. It is a positive thing because it's part of the direct engagement by citizens in the governance of their country. It is a positive. What needs to be tempered is how the police respond to that. What needs to be addressed is how the police take steps to control the crowds and to anticipate challenges that may be there.
Well, thank you for joining us. Sometimes, in South Africa, we like to harp on the negative in our country. It shows that even in protest, you have to look at the positives, and that means that we have a vibrant constitution. However, you say we need to train our police force, and the policing of crowds in general needs to be done better in South Africa. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That is Senior Africa Researcher at Human Rights Watch Africa Division, Dewa Mavinga, giving us a unique insight into protest in South Africa. Of course, over the last couple of weeks, we've lost many lives around the country as protests, well, they turned violent. And now to add further fuel to this issue, the Numsa General Secretary, Ivan Jim, is accusing the police ministry of taking away citizens' rights to demonstrate here in South Africa. Jim was speaking at the union's political school in Johannesburg yesterday. A number of people, of course, have died at the hands of police while demonstrating.
Numsa is concerned. It says the country is being driven towards a police state. This, it says, stems from the killing of 34 miners in Marikana by police and the death of 4 people in Mothutlong in the northwest while they were protesting for a basic need, water. On Friday, the minister called on those who hold protest marches to do this within the parameters of the law. The minister also announced that 6 police officials have been suspended in the wake of the Mothutlong killings. 8 others were served with suspension notices. Numsa President Andrew Chirwa told delegates that Numsa is under pressure to reverse its special Congress resolutions. Late last year, the union resolved to withdraw its support for the ANC in the elections. Numsa also vowed to stop paying its contributions to COSATU.
As we speak, we are being invited to come and account to a group, I won't say leadership, I'll call them a group of people who call themselves leaders of federation, that we must come, that we must come and tell them and explain to them whether are we going to pursue the outcome of the Numsa Special Congress. Hey, I've never heard about such a thing.
The political school ends next Saturday. Yodisa Njamela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, our top story, Sanral, and you've been talking about that a lot on social media. Let's just take a look at what you're thinking about. Ramona Maketa says the most dangerous job in South Africa right now is working for Sanral. Of course, they've had some bomb scares there the last couple of weeks. Tahir Jardine says things are getting hectic at Sanral. Pagat, I like that. People against gantries and tolling. That's quite an original one, a play on the one in Cape Town, people against gangsterism and drugs, of course, most famous. Taking e-toll protests to the next level. People against gantries and tolling. That's very original. Well done there. Maestro says, hey, someone is busy with Sanral, ne? I hope they know what they're doing. This is a criminal offense. I'm sure they know what they're doing. They're sending white powder to the officers. People are serious as well. Retief says, I think Sanral is an elaborate scheme or a social engineering experiment to unite South Africa. Van der Liefde, he says, it's working. And then Salalo says, if you were scheduled for an interview tomorrow at Sanral's offices, would you pitch Choose Life, she says. And Copy Go says, Sanral workers pre-strike for more wages seems like a dangerous office space. Can this really carry on? E-tolls. And Mallory Perrott says, Josie has got their terrorism on lock at Pillay. Anthrax scares, bomb threats, Sanral officers are in desperate need of a fire pool. Everybody's a comedian on a Monday morning, I think. Miriam says, I sort of feel sorry for Sanral employees. Bomb scares, anthrax scares, working for the biggest bully in the country at the moment. Yeah, those are some of your comments. We love your comments. Keep it coming at SABC Newsroom on Twitter. Of course, the website where everything is sabc.co.za/news. We've got special reports. We've got all sorts of stuff on the website there. So if you're really keen on what's happening around the world right now, go there for an update. It's now one of the top 5 on the continent. After a short break, well, we look at interesting figures on why black South Africans are driving the home buying market in South Africa. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
To Your World on DSTV channel 404. Let's take a look at stories making headlines.
Unfortunately, most of the deaths occur in children in sub-Saharan Africa. And so the original focus and the continued focus of this vaccine is on preventing that disease and death.
What happens when you stop by an official who turns out to be, well, the president?
We're checking license.
Okay.
Is it fine and valid?
This stand is the biggest stand in Nairobi show. Of course, we have won the best foreign private exhibitor.
And that was Your World on SABC News, 404 on DSTV.
Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, the show that explores your legal rights and recourse to those violated. I'm your host, Dumila Matez. Will the ban on alcohol, or the marketing of alcoholic beverages, include things like sorghum beer, homemade beer, and those kind of things?
I think what is must be clear is that we are not banning the industry, not at all. We are controlling the industry.
As I'm sitting here, I'm actually agreeing with the minister violently.
Advertisement says to young people, it's cool to drink. Drinking is associated with success. Drinking is associated with celebrities.
We cannot afford to have adverts on television that glorifies alcohol.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back here with Newsroom on SABC News. The effect of black economic empowerment and racial transformation in the workplace has had an effect on the home buyers market in this country. According to an estate agent survey by First National Bank, black, Asian and coloured home buyers in suburban South Africa now outnumber whites for the first time since the end of apartheid. Less than half of the total buyers last year were white, down from 57% in 2005, when the bank first started to track the racial composition of home ownership numbers. Now, to talk to us about the survey and give us some insights into why we see this transformation is Paul Rudecock, an analyst at data and analytics provider company Lightstone. Good morning, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Aaron.
Paul, first of all, interesting developments. What does the numbers tell us?
Well, even if we look at the actual home ownership, so the estate agent survey looked at buyers at estate agents. We've actually seen that home ownership amongst black owners, now we estimate this using analytical means because you can't, of course, ask that anymore. We've actually seen that increased from 39% to about 45% over the last 10 years, while white ownership dropped from 43% to 40%. So we've actually seen that tipping point about 3 years ago in home ownership. Now the difference is that includes a lot of low-end affordable housing, which estate agents don't necessarily deal with.
Now, the numbers sort of points, it's sort of, you know, the first thing you'd look at, people would say, oh, the Employment Equity Act and black economic empowerment is working in South Africa, definitely because of these numbers. But is that what you see?
Well, I think you would have liked to see more aggressive transformation, and we've actually seen quite a good velocity of transformation pre the recession in 2009. And that leads you to a point where in an economic system, if there's energy and people want to buy and they want to trade, transformation can happen quicker. And that's what we've seen is in the last 5 years where the recession recovery was quite slow, not a lot of transformation.
Do you then expect this transformation to accelerate over the next decade?
If we can get our economy up and running, definitely. I think that's the key. If we get an active economy, that's going to help transformation. Because I think we're doing a good job in empowering black people to generate wealth. But we don't necessarily have a very active economy where they can use that wealth and acquire property and do stuff with it.
Africa is about to go through a boom. Could that maybe be a catalyst that we could see South Africans tap into in order to help drive this sort of boom in development?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially if you look at foreigners, when they look at entering Africa, South Africa is the stronghold, is the place where they want to come first. What that might do is it might drive property prices in the luxury sector up because foreigners come in here with a very low currency and they can buy houses relatively cheaply.
You spoke about the type of houses a little bit earlier that new owners are buying. Just tell us about the sort of price ranges that this study focused on, or the sort of trends that you guys saw in what kind of houses were being sold.
So we break the property market up into very low-end affordable, especially when looking at things like transformation, because that's the traditional townships and low-end affordable market. Now, currently, the original black owners remained at about between 90 and 50% of those markets. They didn't lose market share there, but where they gained significant market share is in the very high end or the higher end of the luxury market, where we look at properties over 1.5 million.
Yeah.
There they doubled the proportion of market share in the last 10 years.
That's very interesting. And what areas in South Africa saw the biggest growth in this called previously disadvantaged home buyers. Is it Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban? Which province really?
The two provinces that also had the highest economic activity, which was Gauteng and Northern Cape, which is quite interesting.
That's very interesting. Northern Cape.
There's been a lot of mining activity, iron ores being discovered, new mines being sunk. So I think that drove a lot of the development in the property sector, but then also the buying and selling and the transformation that goes with that.
I wanted to talk to you also about the impact that BEE has had on the buying power of black South Africans. Do you guys see that, and how stark is that increase?
You see it in two ways. You see the proportion of black owners increasing, and then you also see black owners going through up the value ladder of property. So as I said, the buyers don't necessarily lose market share in the lower end of the scale, but they gain in the higher sections, and they doubled in the very high section. It's still a low proportion, but
and what are the negatives? Finally, the negatives, the things that constrain this growth.
I think the one negative is it's still, if you think about 43% of property ownership amongst black people, although 80% or 79% of the population is black, that's still quite disproportionate. So you would have liked to see it grow a bit faster, but as I said, you can't do a lot if the economy isn't booming.
But Paul Roux, we're only 20 years into democracy. I think you want to change the world overnight. I think it'll take a little bit of time. But thank you. Very interesting numbers and a very interesting observations. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Paul Roux de Kock, an analyst at data and analytics provider company Lightstone, who gave us a unique insight into the effect of black economic empowerment and racial transformation in the workplace, what effect that had on the home buyers market in South Africa. Very interesting indeed. But let's take a quick look again what you're talking about. Lots of talking going on social media, of course, at the moment. Oskido says, morning, congratulations to Ladysmith Black Mambazo winning the Grammys in the category of Best World Music. Fantastic. That's the good news. And then Deborah says, South African group Ladysmith Black Mambazo win their 4th Grammy Award. That's correct. That, of course, the Grammys happened very early this morning, South African time. Why can't we just have Ladysmith Black Mambazo perform every year, says Benjamin. Pinky says, LBM, congratulations to Ladysmith Black Mambazo. I knew Joseph and the team will make us proud. Church of God is very proud of our pastor, says Pinky. Patricia says, yes, well deserved. Lord Royals win the Grammy Award for Song of the Year. And Aitsu says, so yeah, Daft Punk won the Best Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards. I'm not surprised, one of my favorite bands, Daft Punk, so congratulations to them. But congratulations in order for our very own Ladysmith Black Mambazo for once again doing the business, of course. Send us your comments, there it is, on the red line, at SABC Newsroom. That's on Twitter. Of course, sabc.co.za/news is the best news site in South Africa, at least. That's my opinion, and I'm allowed to have it. After a short break, we'll do a roundup around our newsrooms, around South Africa rather, to take a look at what's happening today and the rest of the week. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News.
Sometimes a lot of people, in fact, do not have access, firstly, to palliative care. Secondly, even if they do,
So what? Do we just kill them if they don't have access to palliative care?
I think she's actually crucifying my question, with all due respect.
If you actually actively assist somebody to die, then you are convicted of murder.
Who should take the burden of terminating a life?
It's very problematic for doctors to play God.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
With so many bad incidents happening around us, we continue sourcing, unpacking and televising nation-building and compassionate stories. From the nation's pride, those who go all out, top achievers, hard workers, those dedicated to making this country a better place, and unusual friendships. Catch all these and more on SABC News.
This is Newsroom. Welcome back. Let's take a quick look at our news headlines. Numsa General Secretary Ivan Germ has accused the police ministry of taking away citizens' rights to demonstrate. A number of people have died at the hands of police while demonstrating. Numsa says the country is being driven towards a police state. Transport Minister Dipuo Peters has condemned what she describes as attempts to destabilise operations at the Sanral offices in Midrand. This follows yet another scare at the road agency's nerve centre yesterday. The recent bomb threat follows 2 evacuations last week after envelopes containing white powder were sent to the building. And in rugby, South Africa have successfully defended their Las Vegas 7th title as they defeated New Zealand by 14 points to 7 in a dramatic, intense cup final. The team conceded just 2 tries en route to winning their 3rd title from 4 attempts in Las Vegas. That's the good news today for South Africa sports lovers. Of course, the trial of Johan Hendrik Prinsloo starts today in the Bloemfontein High Court. He's facing charges of treason and conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism involving plans to detonate a bomb at the African National Congress leaders at the Mangaung elective conference in 2012. Last year, 2 of the accused went on a hunger strike at the Grootvlei prison to protest against the alleged dragging out of their case. We now cross to Richard Newton in our Bloemfontein studio. Good morning, Richard. Richard, just give us an update on the latest in this case.
Well, good morning, Yeben. And yes, here we are now at this, perhaps the last stage of this court case. You'll remember that initially 7 people were arrested in December 2012. That came down to 4 that appeared in court. Charges against 1 were dropped. Another was found mentally unstable to stand trial and is now a patient of the state. And at the end of last year, the 3rd of the 4 made a deal with the state and pled to a lesser charge, that of conspiracy to commit an act of terrorism as opposed to treason, and was sentenced to 8 years. So now Prinsloo is the last of this group, and his trial is scheduled to start. And of course, I think what everyone is waiting to find out is what really was the plan, what was going to happen, what was meant to happen. Because up until now, there's been a lot of plea bargaining, there's been issues with checking people's ability to stand trial, and we haven't really heard what was going to go down. We've heard that there were allegations that there would be mortars used to bomb the elective conference here in Bloemfontein, that various weapons had been collected for this purpose. But as yet, we don't know what the plan was. And I think with this particular case getting underway now, this last of these plotters, we might know the plan and what allegedly could have happened.
Richard, this is a case that sort of captivated the imagination, really. It's almost like there's an idea developing in South Africa that this kind of right-wing thinking is on the rise. In your experience down in the Free State, is that the case, or is this a complete exception to the rule?
Well, I think it's very interesting to see where this case goes, because when the arrests were made in the beginning, there was this impression created that this was a massive conspiracy to attack the leadership of the country. I mean, it shocked the country, and not surprisingly so. And I think now, perhaps when we get down to the nitty-gritty of what that plan was, what that plan may have been, we may get a better idea of how realistic it was, how much of a wide conspiracy this really was. And in my experience, I think it's not as prevalent as people might like to think. And I think this case might give us an idea of what that network comprised of.
And sort of the sophistication of it really, and whether it really is a legitimate threat. But I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to what's coming out because it's such an interesting case. As soon as you have treason and this kind of conspiracy, it really grabs the attention. But Richard, something that's a little bit more worrying, I think, for the greater South Africans, the drought that you guys are having there in the Free State. I'm hearing now farmers are starting to sell off their livestock. That cannot be good.
Well, that's a very serious issue you're raising there, Eben. There was an auction last week where there were a lot of cattle that were being sold, and it was from commercial farmers down to your small-scale farmers. Now, of course, if you only have 2 cattle and you have to sell them because you can't afford to feed them, that's your livelihood gone. You have to look for another way to make money. And the issue is the feeding. Some farmers were telling us last week that since the winter of 2013, they've had to buy fodder and feed their cattle, which is unsustainable, and they're using cash reserves to buy fodder, and it's got to the point where they can't do it anymore. And of course, the drought we're seeing here is one of these scattered. You may have a farmer on his farm doing quite well, and just his neighbor right next door is unable to continue. And yesterday we had a rainstorm building up, massive clouds, and it rained literally for 3 minutes. And I think the frustration out there amongst farmers is enormous, and it is impacting as well on the cities and the towns, because the heat wave we're experiencing is making people use more water, levels are down, and it's affecting water provision to the cities and towns.
Are we going to see disaster areas being declared in the next week or so, or is that still a drawn-out process?
Well, the requests have been made, I think, as far back as November. And to our understanding, the process is now, it is with the provincial government at the highest level of provincial government, and a decision is soon to be made about whether some of the areas, and I'm thinking here of the north and the west, are suffering quite badly of the province, to receive assistance. But as you say, the Free State is one of the regions, but throughout the country, people are struggling with the heat wave and the drought.
Richard, thank you for your contribution today. That's specialist correspondent in Bloemfontein, Richard Newton, giving us an update on an interesting case, of course, the treason trial that's on at the High Court there today, and of course giving us a little update as to the drought and what's going on, how the farmers in those areas are dealing with it. A 29-year-old Tanzanian national will today appear in the Camperdown Magistrates Court on charges of extortion. The complainant in the case is President Jacob Zuma's second wife, Mantuli Zuma. Now, to take the matter further, we are joined in our Durban studio by Ayanga Mhlongo. Good morning, Ayanga. Long time no speak.
A very good morning to you, Eben. Indeed, it's been a long time. I hope you're well.
Very well, thank you. Just tell us about this case. Very interesting matter.
Well, indeed so, as you say, Eben, but of course it is quite a rather sensitive matter, of course, involving the president's wife. So at the moment, we don't really have a lot of details on it. Aside, as of course you have mentioned, it is a 29-year-old Tanzanian man who was arrested on Friday by Durban police after a case was opened by President Jacob Zuma's second wife, Nompumelelo Mantuli Zuma, a case of extortion. However, we haven't yet been able to get the details, what amount she was talking to, how the amount of the extortion or the circumstances around the case. I can tell you that my colleagues are at the court as we speak, and that is a case, of course, that we will be following up, and hopefully by this afternoon we will know a lot more and to find out exactly if the alleged relationship also between the president's wife and this suspect.
It seems as if the police have almost thrown a little veil of secrecy over this case. Would that be accurate?
Well, indeed, Eben, of course, as I said, because of the sensitivity of the case, they've really not wanted to give us, we've posed a lot of questions to them, wanting more information, and all they've been able to tell us is confirm that the case was opened, that it was a case of extortion, and also, of course, confirm where the suspect will be appearing in court. They didn't even want to tell us during the weekend where the suspect was being held. So it is a case that, of course, they're keeping quite mum about, but what we do know is that there's going to be a heavy police presence outside the Camperdown Magistrates Court this morning.
Is the president's wife expected to attend as well?
Eben, we're not too sure about that. It's something that we will get from our colleagues. We try to get that from the police. It's unlikely, though, that she will attend. It's likely just to be a very brief appearance today. I mean, it's going to be just the suspect's first appearance, so it's going to be very, very brief, maybe just 5 minutes. So it's unlikely that she'll be in court today.
Well, it's a little bit like a soap opera playing out, and I'm sure South Africans are looking forward to what you guys are going to come up with today in order to tell us about this case. It's a very interesting one. A Tanzanian national will appear in court on charges of extortion, and of course the complainant being President's second wife, Mantuli Zuma. Just tell us about this other thing you're doing about a possible strike at the Durban University of Technology.
Yes, well, even as we know, every year we seem to have these strikes by students. We haven't yet received the list of grievances. We understand that on Friday, the students handed over a list of grievances to the university's vice-chancellor. The main grievances relating to financial aid. It is a story that we are going out to the institution now just to see how things are happening there, whether there is a protest, a police, etc., and also obviously speak to the student leadership on their grievances. But we do know that on Thursday and Friday last week, lectures did not take place, and the students were requested to go home, to return today. But it's unlikely that lectures, of course, are going to take place today. Eben, we are going to head out there. In fact, I'm leaving as soon as I'm done with you, just to go to the institution and just to find out what is happening there. It's one of those sad stories, Eben, that at the start of every year we see these students striking, and of course that will impact on learning at the institutions.
Well, let me not hold you any longer then, my dear, and let you get on with the job then today. That's the lovely Ayanda Mhlongo down in Durban giving us an update on some very interesting stories. A Tanzanian national appearing in court on charges of extortion, with the complainant being President Jacob Zuma's second wife, Mantuli Zuma. And then, of course, there's also a possible strike at Durban University of Technology. Very, very interesting. Finally, we move down to Cape Town, where the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of police inefficiency in Khayelitsha is entering its second week today. It is expected to call 2 experts when it resumes at Lookout Hill this morning. Professor Jeremy Seekings from UCT's Centre for Social Research and Professor Charles Simpkins of St. Augustine's College will be talking about demographic and socio-economic aspects of Khayelitsha. The commission, established by the Western Cape Premier Helen Zille, is also probing an alleged breakdown in relations between the community and the police in Khayelitsha. Now, to chat more about this and other stories coming from our Cape Town newsroom, we are joined by TV assignments editor now, Lumko Jimlongo. Good morning, Lumko. Last time I spoke to you, you were just a mere reporter. Now you're the boss.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Evan. Yeah, a bit of upward mobility on this side. Yeah.
Fantastic. You do a fantastic job down in Cape Town anyway, and well deserved, my brother. Just tell us about this Commission of Inquiry and what we can expect, high points and so forth, over the next couple of days.
Well, look, Eben, as you've rightly said, it kicked off last week, started with the site visits to these actual areas, which I would imagine was to get the commissioners themselves. You remember it's a retired Judge Kate O'Regan with former NPA boss Vusi Pikoli. I suppose they're just trying to get a feel of the geography and the areas that they're going to be investigating or talking about. They've called a couple of witnesses since then. Mostly it's more information and gathering at this point in time, because they're calling from members of the community who've had experiences with the police, bad and good. And they've also called, I remember last week, family members of a guy who was killed in a vigilante incident was also called. And that's expected to continue throughout the week. As you would imagine, some emotional moments. So as they go on with their work, like you said, today they're going to be calling few more members of the community and as well as the NGOs that actually initiated the initial complaints to the Premier's office that led to the formation of this. So currently it's going to be two-pronged. It's basically happening in 2 sessions. The first section is more clarity seeking and seeking information and getting everything up to speed. And then we're more likely to see the authorities, like the police authorities, authorities and other leaders in the community being called as it draws towards the close. I mean, they set aside 22 days for this specific session. So today there will be those two experts basically looking at the socio-economic aspects and as well as three community members that will be testifying in terms of what's their experience with the police and the general life in Khayelitsha.
And this is the thing I think that people outside of the Western Cape don't really understand. Just explain to us the level of lawlessness that we see on the streets of those, let's call them townships, the Khayelitshas, and we can go further. We can go Gugs, we can go Nyanga, and so forth. People are really scared to walk around on the streets. Would that be accurate?
Well, look, Eben, I wouldn't really say people are scared to walk on the streets, but there is the criminal element. It does seem to be a bit more than your average other communities here. You'll remember the Cape as a whole has always had a sort of issue with gang-related activities, drug-related activities, as well as now there's this trend that's coming now to the fore where there's a lot of, it would be safe to say, an increased an increase in incidents of violence against women and especially children. Looking at the 9-year-old, the other court case that is currently ongoing, where she was raped and burned and set alight. So it's incidents such as that one, and so basically what this commission was called for was that now people, especially in Khayelitsha, seem to be starting to take the law into their own hands. There were numerous, almost on a weekly basis, vigilante incidents where people have taken the law into their own hands, basically because it would appear, or it's alleged, that they've lost all the faith they had in the police. They're saying that these people get arrested, then they're out the next day or 2 days later, and they're back at it again. So they felt enough is enough. And so a group of NGOs came together and they said, no, this is not the way to go about it. Let's see what can be done. And obviously the Premier responded to that by the suggestion that we should form this commission to check and try to get to the root of the problem.
Lumko, it's not just in Cape Town where you have vigilante groups. Here in Johannesburg, we now have a new group. It's called PAGAT, People Against Gantries and Tolling. Just to give you an update. But thank you for joining us today. That's our assignments editor now, the boss in Cape Town, Lumko Jimlongo, a man who's been doing fantastic work there for a long time, giving us an update. A very important story for the communities down in the mother city. It's a story about why there's a general level of lawlessness on the streets and why people feel the need to take matters into their own hands. Of course, you can send at SABC Newsroom, or if you want to send us other contributions, video and so forth on Twitter, you can also go to sabc.co.za. Newsroom was broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. We are on air live every morning between 9 and 10 a.m. with highlights of this very show rebroadcast at 2 in the afternoon, and then another rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning, just in case you missed it. This is SABC News. You have been watching Newsroom, where we love it in the morning.